I have this paper, and the title of my paper is Marvel or Menace, Anatomizing the Menstrual Politics of Indian Screen. And I divided my paper into three sections, where the first section is dealing with just an introduction to menstruation, and the second one would be about menstruation in popular imagination, how this menstruation is represented in popular imagination, like films, TV, narratives, visuals, and advertisements, and other and all these kinds of things. And the third one is the main area where how this Indian screen is representing menstruation, what kinds of ideologies or what are the notions which guide or mold the representation of menstruating ladies or menarche or menopause, how these things are getting represented in Indian screen. So for that, I would like to share my screen with you. Just give me a moment. Can you see this thing, Azina? Can you see the screen?
Not yet, ma'am. Not yet. Yes, now I think it's buffering. It is got it.
Yes, yes.
Yes,
Now
ma'am.
I
It's visible.
it's visible.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, now moving on to our session, Marvel or Menace. And Razina, if any problems, just unmute yourself and tell me, okay?
Sure, ma'am.
I
Sure.
am very
I'll be.
poor in reading messages and other things. Okay,
No,
that's why.
ma'am. I'll be
Okay, now,
monitoring the whole thing. Okay, ma'am.
okay, thank you. Okay, now this Marvel or Menace, anatomizing the menstrual politics of Indian screen. That is our section, and where actually I would like to talk about. One second. Okay. I'd like to talk about this representation of menstruation on Indian screen. And for that, I begin my session uh, with a definition of menstruation. In fact, what is menstruation? It's a natural biological process of bleeding. It's a process of bleeding where it's blood, partly blood and partly tissues of uterus. It flows out of uterus to the body. It flows out of the body from uterus, out of the body is flowing out. Then what happens is it's making its way through cervix and vagina. And that is menstruation. It's a process where this blood and partly tissues of uterus flow out of this body, making its way through cervix and vagina. An average menstrual cycle is 20 days, and it begins on the first day of menstruation. Since it is a phenomenon unique to women, that is the main thing. It has always been surrounded by taboos and myths. That's why women are being excluded from many aspects of socio-cultural life. Hence, the widespread conception of moral insanity and impairment of this self-control, everything is getting associated with menstruation. And see, in our society, we do have a belief that the side effects of this menstruation, that means menstruation has side effects. It's believed that the side effects of menstruation, it could be psychological and it could be physical. Society thinks that women are irregularly emotional, and periods affects their thinking ability. See, moreover, we think that it's something which is to be concealed, and we must not talk about this thing publicly. Only in whispers, and that's why we do have a famous brand also, whispers. Only whispers and special phrases are allowed. Some kinds of euphemistic expressions are used by people to refer to menstruation. And in fact, that's why this is in reality, this is menstruation. So I have a slide to show you. This is something which is happening during this menstrual process, where you can see it's scientifically each month what is happening. This is, I hope you can see, this thing is ovary, and this in each month the ovum is bringing forth a ripening ovum. And this ovum, it will be making its way down, this is fallopian tube, down fallopian tube to the uterus. See, on its way, if the ovum meets with a sperm, there will be an embryo and pregnancy would be the result. But if it fails to meet a sperm, what would happen? Definitely there would be menstruation. It would burst out of its sac, and this ovum, it will make its way through cervix and vagina, and it will go out, trickling down. So that is menstruation. So, but in the society we have certain cultural taboos and beliefs about menstruation, puberty, and reproductive health, and these things are so rampant in the society that we even now we follow certain age old conceptions. And now, why I have taken visual narratives? See, visual narratives could be considered as they play a major role in disseminating the stereotypical ideologies. See, they are in a way could be treated as menstrual manuals, which are so playing a major role in accelerating the dissemination of stereotypical ideologies. And these, especially when you talk about these visual narratives, they showcase women as imperfect, moist, and passive ones. They showcase women as imperfect, moist, and passive. And one more reason is there is why this visual culture is something which is seeing is much more than believing. See, if you write down something, people would never give importance. That's why, because I always talk about this thing in my class. I have asked many students whether they have read Balegala Saki Bashir. Many of the students haven't read even Balegala Saki, but they have seen the Mammootty's movie Balegala Saki. So that's Balegala Saki. That's why the significance or the prominence of visual culture, it's so great. And visual culture could be considered as a place where meanings are contested, debated, and transformed. And this is the space where you will get different ideas about class, gender, sexual, and racialized identity. See, some kinds of stereotypical ideologies about class, gender, sex, race, all these things are constructed by some so-called hegemonic power structure relations in the society, and they disseminate these kinds of stereotypical ideologies. And what we poor people, we audience, we simply end up being consumers, and we are simply kind of swallowing all these kinds of notions propagated by these visuals without even raising our voice. And it is the place where meanings are created and contested. And most important thing, it has this kind of a global nature, a universal nature, and it could be considered as menstrual manuals. These visuals which depict menstruation on screens could be considered as menstrual manuals supplied by patriarchally programmed filmmakers. So the filmmakers are patriarchally programmed, and they supply you some kinds of menstrual manuals. There's programmed filmmakers and a napkin manufacturers. Such visuals showcase the inferiority complex of women, which in turn is the resultant of the menstrual flow. She is always shown as passive, moist, and imperfect agent for procreation. Such ideologies found momentum owing to the philosophies propagated by certain philosophers, like we have the great philosopher Aristotle, who had written on the generation of animals, where he is talking about the sexual intercourse and he is analyzing the sex, and he says that this men or the male partner is active in sexual intercourse because he is the one who gives shape to the raw material provided by women during sex. So women are passive because they simply give you the raw material, they simply give you the body, but men are active and because they provide shape to the raw material given by the females. And this men are the ones who are responsible who give you soul also. See, so this is a kind of a notion even of this philosopher. So that's why this these kinds of visual narratives always highlight certain stereotypical notions. Even though this menstrual cycle is a natural process, women are always supposed to follow certain rules, especially constructed by this dominant patriarchal discourse. That's why they are always treated as impure, unclean during the time of menstruation. So, what needed in reality, in fact, what we need to demystify the menstrual taboos. For that, a strategic approach approach is needed. And normally when you talk about this visual culture, I always actually my PhD is also on visual culture, because I consider this thing is something which is very part of our everyday life. I would say it's something which is inextricably linked to our everyday life. It something which is thriving upon some kind of a consumption of audiences, which in turn fuels the production of it and the circulation of it. See, visual culture is something which is helping us to interpret many bizarre things as familiar. So, in short, visuals are something which the public watches and recognizes. So, it's high time to deconstruct this visual representations of menstruation. And so, that's why I am going to talk about this menstruation in popular imagination, how this menstruation is represented in popular imaginations in literature. See, I would say it's a complete erasure or a surprising absence is there, isn't it? See, like we, in the case of menstruation, also we deodorize, sanitize, and remove the stains, the blood stains, or the evidence of menstrual blood. Somewhat similar situation is there in the case of popular imagination also. See, and this visuals, they always advocate that your secret will be safe. See, all these napkin manufacturers, they do have this kind of a advertisement that your secret. See, it's a secret. It's something which is to be concealed. It's something which is to be hidden. So, what kind of an idea is given to these small kids at the age of 11 or 12 when they have their first menstruation, the menarche? So, when they watch these kinds of advertisements, what kind of a notion is inculcated by these poor kids? See, that is something which is to be addressed. So, what is shown, it's really the glorification of some kinds of taboos, but what needed is to give an awareness of fresh air, consumption of fresh air, and the importance of doing exercises and the personal hygiene. But people will never talk about these kinds of things like fresh air, exercises, and personal hygiene. But what is really shown is some kind of a glorification of potential motherhood. See, potential motherhood, that is the main thing. If you have menstruation, okay, very good, you are lucky, you'll definitely be a mother in the future. So this potential motherhood is something which is glorified. But no one thinks that a girl won't become a full-fledged grown-up woman overnight to be capable enough to produce kids. But it is circulated that after attaining puberty, what happens? Men turn into economic and industrial activities, and women focus on house. Or I would say the domain of action is getting changed. They started giving more importance to this thing called house. And even the minimal amount of knowledge and openness about menstruation has had to break through strong barriers of innuendo and taboo. When we start analyzing these things, we realize the taboos existing in the name of, see, menstruation. And when you analyze this menstruation in the aspect of this popular imagination, then you will realize the language. What kind of a language is used in literature, to whether it be a film or it be a book or any advertisement or anything? What kind of a language is used by the so-called patriarchy programmed filmmakers, the so-called feminists, to refer to this menstruation? It's, of course, it's a phallocentric language. It's a phallocentric language centering around phallus, male sexual organ, the symbol of power. See, we have a Natalie F. Joffrey, who is an anthropologist and lecturer at the New York University, who is talking about English, Polish, Irish languages, where she finds only very scanty menstrual vocabularies are existing in many of these kinds of English, Polish, Irish languages, because they use very common words to refer to menses, like the words like red aunt, I'm having the painters, a red king, or they would use the strawberry woman to denote a bleeding woman. Expressions like leakage, flow, and losing blood, red letter day, sickness. See, so these are the terms or phrases used by people to refer to menstruation. See, they would never say that I have, or this is my menstruation, this is my period day. They would never say these kinds of things directly. They would definitely make use of these kinds of euphemistic expressions, and these expressions would definitely be denoting, representing the ideas of time, regularity, blood, and redness. Even then, health and hygiene and such kinds of issues are not at all going to be touched upon. And we have a concept called red humor also. I hope you are aware of this red humor. For my paper, I am dealing with actually, even though I talk something about, I begin with this definition and other things. The second part of my paper is about menstruation, representation of menstruation in visuals, like the first visuals or the so-called some European visuals where menstruation was mentioned. And the third section where I'll be dealing with Indian visuals, and especially why Indians, because when we talk about India, I have analyzed some Rajasthani films and Marathi films, and of course Malayalam. And majority of the films are taken from Bollywood, because Bollywood is something which is could be considered as the largest filmmaking industry in India, and it's something which represents the Indian psyche, the collective unconscious. Because whether we know Hindi or not, even though Hindi हमारी राष्ट्रभाषा है, it's considered like that. See, we watch Bollywood films, and so it's something which is always taking its subject matter from the so-called Indian myths, culture, tradition, and customs. That's why many of the Hindi films are analyzed here. And I was talking about this red humor. We have an instance of red humor from Misha Madhavan film, directed by Lal Jose, a Malayalam film. I hope you're aware of it, where this Indrajit's character says, Kavya Madhavan's character, that you didn't go to temple. I know, why didn't you go? See, it's a kind of a red humor where it's something, because she is having this menstruation, so she is incapable of doing something. That what is this do action is going to temple. So that could be considered as a red humor, where menstruation is always used as some kind of an idea by which you can ridicule somebody else, especially a girl. And here, especially Natalie F. Joffrey, she is talking about two jokes, that is misogynist jokes are also there. Like the first one, I hope you can see this there on the screen. Sister Mister. See, we read it as Sister Mister, but they read it as Sister missed her periods. Like M and R could be considered as acronyms, where M represents missed and R represents her, and we do have a full stop there, which is interpreted as periods. So sister missed her periods. So this was a joke. It was so prevalent in those days. And there is another one, the next joke. And these people, they, even now we know how this menstruation is used as a pun in many of the situations. So the next one is fun period. Fun period. You can read it like that. Fun period. Fun period. Fun, no period, no menstruation. Even after having fun, if you have no menstruation, then there will be pregnancy. So worry. So these are certain misogynistic jokes, so pertinent in those days. So, what are the purposes of these types of jokes? According to Sigmund Freud, I hope you're aware of Sigmund Freud, there are two purposes of jokes. The first one, to be hostile. To be hostile to whom? To girls. To be aggressive, to be satirical, to be defensive, of their inefficiency, especially this male righteousness concept is there, propounded by Catherine Hakim, who is the person of Roti Capital. I hope you're aware of the theory. Where she is also talking about this thing where human male, especially men, they do have some kind of inferiority complex. So they always try to kind of block the threat posed by women by highlighting the so-called morality, and by finding fault with each and every activity of women. So that is the first thing, to be hostile. The second one, to be obscene, like exposing or denuding the other. So you are denuding the other, you're trying to stripe them off, and especially women, that is happening. And these kinds of jokes could be considered as smut. Now, that is another term coined by Sigmund Freud, where smut could be considered as, these jokes are termed as smut. According to Sigmund Freud, it is the intentional act of intentionally these men try to bring into prominence or highlight the sexual facts and relations by speech. They always try to give importance to sexual facts and relations, because already they do have a notion that in sex women are passive, and they are inefficient, and they are incapable. So they always try to highlight or bring into prominence the concept called sex in almost every aspect of their speech, so that this women must feel some kind of an insecurity. And especially in all these kinds of jokes, women are always seen as passive, and they're always being presented as having a sexual role. So this, when you analyze these jokes, you can see these jokes spoken well with classification of women into two categories. See the binary segmentation of Madonna and Vogue. Like there, on the one side, you would find this chaste lady perform acts as distasteful, and the next side, on the other side, you would tramp bad girl who is reveling in sex. See, that's you know, in most these kinds of daily serials, like the daily soaps, right? We have different serials where you can see on the one side we have a so-called chase ladies, and on the other side we do have some rebellious ladies. And when you analyze the characters of these rebellious ladies, you can see these ladies would definitely be independent. They may be having their own opinions. They may be having their jobs. So such kinds of independent, educated, literate kind of ladies or women are treated as arrogant ones. So they are represented as these kinds of war people, and the other so-called chaste, submissive, silent, subjugated one who wants to be subjugated by their husbands. So such kinds of ladies are treated as glorified. They are treated as Madonnas, and but that is the main thing. Both are defined. See, both these categories are defined with respect to men's perspectives about them. That is mainly happening. So this language could be considered as one of the main barriers by which this women or the girls are getting represented in a very negative manner in the aspect of menstruation. And the next idea is nationalism. This idea of nationalism, we know when we talk about Indian cinema, Indian screens, we have Mother India, the biggest character. See, Mother India, and she is really kind of a maybe a great character, very good. I have no problem with Mother India, but I have only one problem. She is having two sons, but she even Mother India is more blessed to have a girl. That is the problem of our Indian screen. See, it's Mother India, the great, and the Mother India, how she was befooled by her son. Hope you have seen the movie. See, this nationalism, it will be considered as a national menstruation. Many of women don't abstracted accordance with the demands of nation. Now you can see, and it keeps it keeps on changing also. Where you can see sticking on to the idea that women must keep themselves safe. They must keep themselves safe from the betrayal of dripping blood revealing outline. So these are something negative, stripping. But see, what's the problem if there is blood? If there are blood stains there on your dress, see, you are a girl or you are a woman, you do menstruation, that itself. But what is happening? These are some kinds of negative things. These are something agents of betrayal. Menstruation remains a topic for always concealment, and the language used is a serious one and addressing only women, okay, not girls. So that's why stressing the utility and purpose and ability of women to assume responsibility for the next generation and to produce kids. And the most important thing which is to be noted down is in this regard is codification of women. What kinds of women? How? What are the images getting depicted there on the screen? Like ideal upper class, middle class, white women. Okay, that is the most important thing which is to be noted down. You can see this upper class white middle class women there appearing on the screen and talking about those special days, those difficult days. They won't say that I had menstruation during my periods, I made use of this particular pad or something or anything, but they would say those special days, or those difficult days, special, difficult, or that time of month. And so these kinds of euphemistic expressions are used, and they discuss psychological issues rather than physical or health issues. See, and when you watch these kinds of advertisements or definitely these kinds of narratives, there you can see the only girls below 25-year-old are shown as if it's something which is happening only in teenage girls or something, someone below 25. See, only white women are shown. That's another important thing. So the codification is, it's very much important to be noted down. And and I always feel very bad about this perfume sanitary pads, where you can see artificial needs are created. See, they first created the need and then rushed to fill it. They were the ones who propagated this notion that this odor is there, it's really foul smell is there, so we need to avoid the foul smell. So they started selling some kinds of making this kinds of perfume sanitary pads, and they started selling it. Okay, and then we realized that okay, this odor is something which is to be avoided. Okay, we can go for this perfumed one. So this artificial pseudo needs are constructed by the same capitalist consumerist society, and what we people are doing is we simply buying it, end up in these kinds of things. So this is these could be considered as the reasons. And when we talk about this visual, the first visuals on menstruation, that only in 1970s a new explicitness regarding menstruation had been in the air. Think about it, 1970, only in 1970 it became a subject for TV songs and commercial movies only in 1970s, as if women were not bleeding till 1970s. They may allude to the discomforts of, see, even in 1970s they talked about what even they mentioned this thing, they talked about the discomforts of menstruating women. And the first menstrual situation appeared in a TV series called All in the Family, as it is visible there on the screen. All in the Family, that is the name of a web series. And there was one episode, the title of the episode was Battle of the Month. See, the Battle of the Month, the titles are also very interesting. The Battle of the Month, where one particular character is there, the Gloria. The name of the character is Gloria. And this particular thing was aired on MTV. And this character called Gloria, she's seen as irritated during her periods. That's another thing. Every 28 days, we do have this menstruation and we'll definitely lose our temper. See, when I talk about myself personally, all of my friends, they know me. I'm a kind of person. I always get angry at no matter whatever may be the situation. Somewhere I during the menstrual cycle, I have this each and every moment because see, my kids are I always saying that last month I was and I was totally I was totally in December. I almost really died. But what the society is that only during women do have this sense of problems. That is another thing, and that is being represented there in the particular English series, the family, but the battle month. And have another episodes, another show like I Love You, then on maybe Tyler Moore Show, Goodbye, and see considered as some feministic because it there monarchy means the first periods. It is used. You can see the female character called Karen Chandler, who is married and is also likes
Uh, Excuse me,
yes.
Savita ma'am.
Razina, you
Uh,
can't
sorry
hear me?
to sorry to interrupt, ma'am, but your voice is breaking in between. Just for the past 2 or 3 minutes.
No. Let me let me see. 1 second, Razina. Sorry for the convenience. Tina, hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Clear.
Am I clear?
Yes, ma'am. You're clear. You're audible also.
Okay,
I
okay, okay.
think maybe it's Sunday, ma'am. Tend to have some network issues all over.
Oh, sorry,
So,
very sorry.
no, ma'am. We
Okay,
should say sorry for interrupting you. You were going in a perfectly smooth manner. Really sorry
thank
to
you, thank you.
disturb, but
No, it's
your
okay,
voice was
okay.
not audible. That's why, ma'am. Sorry.
Okay, now, okay. So, did you hear nationalism? I was talking about
Yes, we could
nationalism.
hear part of it, ma'am. And, ma'am, I think you can start your screen sharing also, the
Okay, okay.
presentation.
It's okay. 1 second. And okay. I hope you can see the screen. First visuals.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. I was talking about this first visuals. Uh, like only in the 1970s, this menstruation, it had been discussed for the first time only in the 1970s. Now, the name of that particular show is All in the Family. That is the name of the TV show. And there was one episode. The title of that episode is The Battle of the Month, which was aired on March 24, 1973. And even though they talked about menstruation, but they represented it in a very negative manner, because the character, the Gloria, that is the name of the character, she is seen as irritated during her periods. That is the kind of a theme of that particular Battle of the Month. And then we have some other shows like I Love You, On the Mary Tyler Moore Show, then Goodbye, Cries and Whispers, Valerie and Her Week of Wonders. And, out of these different shows, I Love You and Valerie, these are the two important ones. In the case of I Love You, there you can see Karen Chandler, that is the name of the protagonist. She is a married lady and married woman, and she is having a husband and three kids. And, this could be considered as an important one where she leaves her husband and she's going to live with her lover, Alex. But then her daughter Julie is having her menarche, the first periods. Then suddenly, what we can see is she is canceling her date with her lover, and she's simply coming back to meet her daughter. But actually, here and these mother and daughter, they are seen as celebrating and talking about choices. Here, what we can see is what seems to be important is a woman is putting the need of another woman. The mother is putting the need of her daughter ahead of her lover. So the man's need is sacrificed here. So that's why menarche is used as a symbol of emancipation in this particular show. And then we have a goodbye, cries and whispers of Bergman's cries and whispers. There you can see the wife. What she is doing is she is injuring her vagina, and just to avoid sexual intercourse. And the husband thinks that okay, she is menstruating. And Valerie and her week of wonders. That's another thing. It's another where you can see the director is Jerome Jayas, and where it's a Czech film where you can see menstruation is considered as a gateway. It is represented as a gateway, a kind of an awakening to the new perceptions and possibilities of being a woman. It's really a true feminist film. And if you analyze fairy tales, I just have gone through some fairy tales. You can see these things. Fairy tales are also dealing with the practices of menarcheal seclusion and avoidance of menstruating women, similar to primitive society. See, in generally, what we can see is this menstruation or the periods. It's always treated as something that is impinging upon the male consciousness. It's something could be considered as a sign of a lack of pregnancy, or could be considered as a reason for postponing sexual contact. Anyway, in this, it is always getting represented as a shock. See, that's the most important thing which is to be noted down. It's always getting represented as a shock, and then something serious, and then last we do have some kind of a celebration also. So it is generally they talk about missed periods and fear of pregnancy, women's unhappiness with cramps, etc. So only such kinds of things are highlighted. And I, for the time being, I limit myself to Indian screen, because in the when you watch this Indian visual narratives on menstruation, there you can see how they represent menarcheal competition, fear, pride, and especially this ambivalent attitude is very much visible when you watch Indian cinema or Indian visuals on menstruation. Because a culture of silence, that is another important thing which is to be addressed. See, a culture of silence has always been there in the case of menstruation. And finally, by punching holes in this culture, the topic of menstruation finds its place. But since it triggers discussions on class, gender, race, sex, these scenes would definitely be evolving into a predictable patterns of shape. We have a great example called Padman. Okay, I'll talk about Padman also. So there are some important discourses. See, a culture of silence, they would never talk about health and hygiene issues. That is the main thing. Even though Padman is talking about health and hygiene issues, but they highlight masculinity and masculine support. So that could be treated as protective legislation, and I'll talk about that also. See, some ideological discourses are there like purity, pollution, shame, and stigma. And purity and pollution would definitely be leading you to religion, a kind of a sensitive, controversial topic which we are not supposed to talk about. See, when we talk about religion, see, this menstrual process, it's something which is inspiring fear and wonder. It's always been treated as a mystery, something magical. So we have this religious concept like this images of bleeding women. See, earlier in primitive ages, early men, they made womb a goddess, womb a goddess, and worshipping an appeasement of this womb or the great mother and the bleeding fertility. So that was so common, and those were the days of farming. And as a result, they got good harvest by worshipping this bleeding image. See, recently we do have a movie called Chori. I hope you might have seen the movie, directed by Vishal Furia. It's actually it's a remake of Marathi film Lapachapi, where you can see small girls, they are murdered for the sake of good harvest. See, they just sacrifice the lives of girls to get good harvest. See, whether it be murder or it be worship, see, we can see the lives of girls are always being utilized for the sake of the society. They have no role of their own. See, that's something. This happened in primitive ages, and later, when this farming was replaced by hunting, men became more independent. And this newly acquired some kind of a relative stability or independence, something which is permitting men to use more direct ways to isolate menstruating women. See, during this farming age, they needed women, but when they started hunting, they were going out. So they had more ways, or they had more excuses to isolate menstruating women. Hence, they made her a taboo. So, only with the arrival of this hunting age, we can see the segregation begins. So, menarchal girls, they underwent a pubertal seclusion, not only in ancient and primitive societies, but also in post-industrialized world. Women have been treated as unreliable and unstable. We have that great movie, The Great Indian Kitchen, directed by Geo Baby, where even now there are many families where these kinds of pubertal seclusion is taking place. And religion-wise, it is believed that this menstruating women, they emit some threatening supernatural power. See, that is mana, that's also known as menotoxins. And that's why when you know, see, especially in Hindu families, we do have, I'm not talking about anything against Hindus, but even now we know these kinds of things are getting practiced in many of the families, where we do separate poor girls in menarche and maybe during their menstrual cycle, menstruating periods and other things. The taboos are meant to help others. See, what is the main purpose of why they are segregating these girls, why they are isolating these girls? They are giving you an excuse also, this patriarchal people, the patriarchal society, because they are these seclusion or these kinds of pubertal seclusion or segregation. It's something which is meant to help others to avoid her by restricting her movements so that she can easily get through her menstrual period. Because this, she is emitting, her body is evacuating some kind of a mana or menotoxin, which is dangerous not only to the others in the society but also to her also. So if you are segregating her, she can easily get through this thing without succumbing to her own deadly powers. It's seen that periods has always been interpreted in different ways. This is really ambivalent. On the one side, where you are worshipping this bleeding image, on the other side you are segregating this bleeding image. So that's why it could be considered as something being ambivalent. So there are many reasons of this thing also, like to block the threat posed by this women. This menstruation and childbearing could be considered as sources of envy to men. And we always connect this thing, this menstruation is always being treated as a mysterious one, and we are always collecting this thing, connecting this thing with the cycles of moon and the cycles of seasons, the rhythm of the tides and the disappearance of the sun. See, so that's why it is considered as something. It's believed that if you come into contact with this menstrual blood, what would happen? It would definitely dull your wit, and it would eventually lead to slow decline and ultimately to your death. And that's why menstruating women must avoid the contact with men. So, and we have some films like Gaoka, a period house. It's a small Rajasthani film where you can see a small girl. It's the film talks about many issues. A child marriage is one issue, where you can see a girl is getting married at the age of 13, or I think 12 or 13 or something. And then on the first day itself, that means I think the first day itself, the marriage day itself, she is having a menarche, the first period, and she does not know how to handle the situation. And this particular person called what is it, mother-in-law. And the mother-in-law is such a great nice person, in inverted commas, you can't see my face, so that's why in inverted commas she is cursing the daughter-in-law, and she says that actually, okay, you are bringing what normally this daughter-in-law, she is supposed to bring in what dowry, and what she is, the Gauka's daughter-in-law. Gauka means a period house, a kind of a menstrual hut, something which is set at some distance from the common habitat. So, and she is bringing in this kind of a period. That's why she is considered as a curse, and she is not loved by her mother-in-law, and she is forced to go to this kinds of Gauka, and she is living there. And for 4 days or something, she is supposed to live in this Gaokar. But what happens in the fifth day or sixth day, her husband, who is not able to control his sexual frustration, he comes there and he rapes her. The husband rapes the wife in Gaokar, and when the village comes to know about this thing, only the girl is being punished. That is a normal thing in our society. The rape is there because you wear this kind of a dress, or you did something wrong to him. That's why you being raped. Okay, that is our normal custom. Okay, so that is getting depicted in this particular movie. It's a small Rajasthani film, short film, Gaoka, a period house, and then the Great Indian Kitchen. There also you can see how this girl, she's not allowed to get inside this kitchen, and she is actually getting, if somebody is preventing us from getting inside the kitchen, could be considered as something great. See, it's something which is to be blocked. That it's very happy about that. But here in this particular film, you can see it's based on certain taboos, based on certain religious situations. This girl is not allowed entry into kitchen. Why? Because she is bleeding. That is a normal situation. So this is these are certain religious aspects which are preventing. And then when we talk about the social culture preventing the representation of menstruation, or that's why this menstruation is considered as a stigma. And now we have certain social cultural taboos, like menstruation has always been a source of irrational embarrassment and humiliation. And it's something which is getting disseminated through the films and through the visuals, and everywhere they are shown as the girls, these menstruating girls, the menarche girls, they are so shown as sitting back at home. See, nobody thinks about the real reasons. The real reasons of being back at home, maybe some menstrual cramps, maybe their lack of infrastructure in schools. If you go to many schools there, you can see even now there are many schools where these kinds of napkin binding machine may not be available. So, unsympathetic teachers, there are many teachers who don't find this thing is good, or this thing it's not supposed to be talked about, or this it must be something which is to be concealed. So there are many such kinds of teachers are also there. And the social taboos associated, there are many schools, I can't name the school publicly, but I know some schools which the school management or authorities, so called great religious people, they won't allow the menstruating girls to have an entrance through the main gate. Just imagine. So these are the some, even now this is happening in 2021, we are going to have 2022. Okay, so almost all these kinds of aspects are getting mentioned in Batman, where you can see, even though this film is about the liberation of menstruating women, the film as well ends up placing the menstrual stigma on women's shoulders. See, that is an important thing which is to be noted down, where you can see this film is about menstruation, but men are not seen as participating in conversations. It's women who do converse, and that too in whispers. And women are ashamed of talking about menstruation. So it will not become a universal topic unless or until men come forward and start talking about this thing. The same patriarchal notion is underlined here, and the focal point of discussion must be ideological discourses associated with these periods. But such kinds of stereotypical notions cannot be wiped away by this so-called liberated filmmakers. They always talk about masculine support. That's why I hope you are aware of this particular picture also. The Valentine's Day. See, it was released on February 9, and it was a Valentine's Day gift. Such a loving husband, a masculine support. That's the thing. Protective legislation. We have another kind of a film called Alert. Condition Red. It was released in 2017, where also you can see a masculinity is supported. A girl is having menarche, the first period, and you have a brother there standing there. And this brother is the person who is taking care of the sister. And the whole film is talking about the greatness of the brother. Nobody talks about the menstruating girl, but masculine support. That's why when recently, I hope you're aware of the interview of Shobita and Dulquer Salman, when Shobita says that I don't want my male co-actors to care for me. See, and nobody finds fault with Dulquer Salman's smile. That is another problem. And everybody finds fault with Shobita's reply that she does not want to be cared by anybody else. So this caring is one problem. That caring is getting represented in a very beautiful, in a very patriarchal manner in this particular film called Batman. And even in the case of this Batman film, there you can see the women, so-called menstruating women, they rush to Akshay Kumar's character for support. So only supporting incidents are there, and this supporting incidents remain unproblematic for the filmmakers, the society. This supporting incidents have gone too far in I would say in deteriorating the women characters by portraying themselves as rude and rough towards these menstruating girls. When you watch these kinds of films, there you can understand how women deal with this menstruation. But on the other hand, you would find men who are so benevolent in accepting the impure state of women. So that impurity is getting associated with religion. That is an important thing which is to be noted down. And and these kinds of restrictions are giving you, these kinds of taboos are giving you some restrictions like menstrual huts. And what is this menstrual hut? It's some kind of a segregation where you can see the girls are distancing themselves from others and undergoing some kind of a purifying practices because they are evacuating mana, mana or menotoxins. And if she is getting excluded just to be free from her mana and the evil influence of her blood. So this menstrual hut, that is also getting justified or defended by this patriarchal society on the grounds of mana or menotoxins. And there are many food restrictions also. When you talk about these food restrictions, this food could be considered as undoubtedly the first form of property. The first human laws were of food restrictions imposed and maintained by this tribal authorities. But the taboos associated with this handling of food by menstruating women have generally ceased to be observed in many of the postmodern societies. And when we talk about the cultural reasons, there also you can see the first object of worship, that was of course women, and because of their fertility, power, fecundity. But this power to create is giving them a power to destroy also, like they're equating to like Lord Shiva. And there you can see she is responsible for preserving on the one side and she is responsible for destroying. So that's why this menotoxin is there, mana is there. So to just get rid of her power of this deadly influence, we need to segregate her, we need to seclude her. So these are certain kinds of excuses or some kinds of theories propagated by patriarchal society to defend the segregation. And we have certain holy reasons and hygienic reasons, especially holy reasons. I would definitely say no hygienic reasons, holy reasons, where the could be furnished to prevent the sexual intercourse. Like during menstruation, if you have sexual intercourse, definitely what would happen, it would definitely be something which is against the body of man. It would definitely affect a man's health, and it would affect the health of unborn child. And the most important, one of the most foolish arguments propounded by patriarchy is that women are not sexually aroused during periods. And medicine and psychiatry have perpetuated these kinds of false pseudo myths that sexually passive. Women are sexually passive during menstruation. And we do have another important concept called menstrual aesthetic. Now, that would be discussed in the next slide. And we have some philosophical theories also. Now, philosophical theories or psychological theories, these are the theories. Nutritive theory of Aristotle, I have told you, on the generation of animals, where he's talking about the sexual intercourse and where he's analyzing, and he says that men are active and women are passive. So that theory is called nutritive theory. And see, when common people when they start reading the theories of Aristotle, Pythagoras, Avicenna, Empedocles, and Stephenson, and Freud, and Karen Honey, Clara Thompson, they start thinking, okay, so these are the theoreticians, and these people, they talk about they talk ill about this menstruation. So definitely menstruation is something which is to be considered as a stigma, and which is to be concealed, which is to be treated as something negative. So that's why that is the significance of these kinds of theories. And we have plethora theory, and propounded by Pythagoras and Empedocles, ferment theory by Avicenna. See, now what is this plethora and ferment theory? They talk about some kinds of overabundance. They say that women have an overabundance. What is this overabundance? Some kind of an impure state. So evacuation of this extra blood, or this overabundance, or this impurity, is very much needed. And when they evacuate their impure blood, they'll become less healthier. So this kind of a theory propounded by Pythagoras and Avicenna. And we have this Dr. William Stephenson, who was a Canadian statesman. And actually, what is his theory? He says that periods is associated with vital energy, and the excessive nutrient, when this excessive nutritive materials and vital energy is not used in reproduction, it is abandoned through menstruation. So, menstruation, the old days theoreticians are always so keen in propagating some kinds of negative ideologies about menstruation. Then comes our great Sigmund Freud, who talks about menstruation and female castration complex theory, where he says that both the menarche and menstruation could be considered as agitated periods during which previously repressed feelings are released. What else could be expected from Freud, the person who has propounded penis envy? And then we have genital trauma. Karen Honey and Clara Thompson. Karen Honey was a colleague of Sigmund Freud. Actually, they say that this particular menstruation, it's also something very negative, because in the case of women, women are narcissistically concerned about staying young. Staying young, they are narcissistic, and daughters coming of age could be considered as a reminder of their own approaching menopause. So society admires, and especially the society admires or rewards only the bearer of the penis, not the loser of the blood. That's why Karen Honey and Clara Thompson says that actually they've been that society and the restrictions. Women are forced to obey the restrictions of the society, taboos of the society. And the most important thing, the society would never talk about the menstrual cramps, backache, bloatedness, PMS, premenstrual syndrome, dysmenorrhea. They simply talk about the psychological issues. And that's why we have the three important terms like menstrual aesthetic. Now, what is menstrual aesthetic? Something which is helping men to stay away from the impure menstruating woman. And then we have menstrual politics. Now, which is something that is something which is justifying the otherness, something which is justifying the otherness. Two arguments are there, that periods affect the reproductive power of women and financial progress. That's why it would definitely be affecting adversely the financial progress of the society. So women must not be given any factory jobs. That is considered as protective legislation. See, these are some important topics. And since we are running short of time, moving on to the representation of menstruation on Indian screen. See, it's when we talk about Indian screen, you can see mainstream film refuse to admit that menstruation is even existing. Even the female-centric films are also not talking about this thing. And but we have a film called Begum Jan. It's a movie where it's the wife's character, a prostitute, which is interpreted as prostitute by so-called traditional people. And where here we can see a girl, Begum Jan's, the Vidya Balan's character. She says that "Mahine ginna hame aata hai, har bar saal साला लाल करके जाता है." That means we know how to count months. Each month makes us red. That means it could be considered as one of the outright expressions on menstruation ever produced on Indian screen. Normally, it is always treated as something which is to be glorified or stigmatized. But here, Begum Jan is the person who is talking about menstruation, and she is a prostitute, treated as a prostitute in the film. And we have another film called Traffic Signal. And in the case of Begum Jan, she is using, despite being a prostitute, she is using menstruation as a positive thing. And she says that when menstruation comes, we realize that we are not pregnant and we are very happy so that we can continue our job. But there is another movie called Traffic Signal where you can see there is also one prostitute's character. She says that she is using menstruation as an excuse. But in Begum Jan's film, there you can see menstruation is considered as a symbol of empowerment so that they can continue their job of prostitution. But in Traffic Signal, the movie, there you can see Kongana Sen, she is the person, and she makes use of this. Her character is using menstruation as an excuse to avoid sexual intercourse. And then we have the so-called great female-centric films like Razi, Thappad. I hope you are aware of these kinds of the films. Mardani, Neeraja, then English, Lipstick Under My Burqa, then Kahani, Bulbul. Almost all these different films, they would never talk about menstruation. They would talk about female emancipation, liberation in almost all other aspect. But this menstruation is always been silent. They won't talk about this physical features, especially periods, menstrual cramps, and everything. There are many other films like Parched. We have Biredi Wedding. Okay, Biredi Wedding is there. That is the next slide where you can see it is could be considered as one of the important films. Why? Because I don't like the film, but there's a second picture there you can see the masturbation is shown, could be which could be considered as a significant leap in Bollywood film industry, or it could be considered as an important breakthrough. Even then, they didn't talk about masturbation. See, they talk about female companionship, they talk about female friendships, they talk about sisterhood, shared experiences of women, but they will never talk about menstruation. And we can avoid all these films, but I always feel bad when I watch these kinds of sports films. Panga, Mary Kom. See, these are the sports films on female athletes, and they never talk on period pains and menstruation, the struggle faced by female sports personalities, how they are confined to the boundaries of family life. Only that is shown. Marriage and subsequent motherhood, and how these people are regaining their stamina after getting married and after delivering babies. So only such kinds of things are getting mentioned here. Had they mentioned the problems faced by menstruating girls, the films would have been more relatable to the common girls. And we have another film, see, female centric or male centric, I have no idea. See, just look at the figures. Shah Rukh Khan, Madhavan, and Amir Khan, how these people are highlighted. Even though Madhavan is in the background, this is his film. It's not Sala Kaduz, is not the film of that girl. It's about him. See that itself. This films, of course, they talk about the health issues. Okay, now they never touch upon issues like menstruation. Not only, especially when we watch Chak De India, it's an interesting film. There we don't find one or two girls. We find an entire hockey team. Nobody is bleeding. Okay, that is in the case of Dangal also, Geeta and Babida Fogat, they are the two wrestlers. They never experience menstrual cramps, pains, or menstrual diarrhea. Isn't it ironic? See, that's why these films, they won't address these kinds of issues. If they had, it would have been more helpful in shedding the taboo or misconceptions and prejudices around menstruation. So that's why I always feel about this lipstick, dirty picture, Queen. There are many groundbreaking films portraying these women characters in the barest form. But all such liberating discourses would be devoid of menstrual cycle. Isn't it surprising for me? I think it is surprising because I don't know why this is happening. What may be the reason? It is because of some kinds of social or cultural taboos, or is it consciously omitted? I think it is consciously omitted, or is it something that doesn't affect does attract the attention, or is it not viable to be discussed anyway? The silence is maintained by has always been maintained by these filmmakers. It's something The silence is something which is accelerating the proliferation of stigmatized conceptions about menstruation. So it would enhance the belief that period is something which is bringing forth humiliation and embarrassment. Neither it gets represented as a health issue or a social issue. Of course, it's represented as a religious issue or a cultural issue. So that's so that when you represent this thing as a cultural or religious issue, you can easily perpetuate the vicious cycle of stigma revolving around menstruation. Thank you.